check out our streaming schedule for this week. We've got tons of content in terms of the NFL and college football, as we're going live just about every single day this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment where we go live. And now, on with our feature presentation. We're going to get to the man you're looking at right now in just a second. But before we do, I want to talk about something highly controversial that the Associated Press did a few days ago. The AP Stylebook is, in essence, the Bible of writing guides for reporters and journalists everywhere. And you need to know that book inside and out if you're in that industry. It tells you how to abbreviate certain things, how to format things, and how to number things, alongside a few others. If you want to know why the number 9 is always spelt out in articles, but the number 12 isn't spelt out, that's the AP Stylebook for you. And recently, they put out a, shall we say, interesting statement about how to talk about sporting events. I'll let you look at the tweet for yourself, but to say that this got a lot of blowback would be putting it lightly. Anytime you get ratioed on Twitter and get community noted, that usually means you ticked a lot of people off. But one of the parts that ticked people off, because let's be honest, the entire tweet ticked people off, including writers like myself, was the top sentence. A team losing a game is not a disaster. Try telling the people of Atlanta that Super Bowl 51 wasn't a disaster. Try telling the people of Ann Arbor that losing to Appalachian State in 2007 wasn't a disaster. Obviously, is it a disaster in the sense of people losing their lives and cities being destroyed? Of course not. But no one conflates the two. Sports writing is sports writing, and it's in its own bubble. And when a coach calls a game a disaster, of course he's not equating it to real-life tragedies like hurricanes and whatnot. Unless you do something stupid like, I don't know, compare a loss to people losing their lives at a world war, I really don't care that you call a loss a disaster in the sporting context. And speaking of the sporting context, if you like learning more about the history of sports, and in particular, the history of the NFL, then this is the place for you. Because we talk about all things NFL history all the time with a new video every single day on this channel. So if you like that sort of stuff, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and hit 70,000 subscribers. Well, I bring that up because the man you've been watching this whole time, this man right here, well, this man is Detroit Lions head coach Rick Forzano. And he made some, shall we say, interesting remarks after a loss to the Houston Oilers. He made some bizarre comments that the Associated Press would definitely not be too fond of, and that a lot of people wouldn't be too fond of. Because with the Lions and the now-named Tennessee Titans playing each other this Sunday, let's go back to 1975, as in, the first time that the Lions lost to this team. For whatever reason, the Lions can't seem to beat this franchise. They've lost 5 straight entering today if you're watching as of this video getting released. And they've only won twice in the last half-century, never winning since the team moved to Tennessee. You have a thrilling overtime loss in 2012, the Thanksgiving Massacre in 2008, the infamous 1983 game, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, where the Lions somehow lost to a previously 0-10 Oilers team, and you had a crap ton of other games, as the Lions have lost 10 of their last 12. And for the first time they lost, this man right here, Rick Forzano, was the captain of the ship. And let's just say that he said some weird things afterwards that deserve a deep dive nearly half a century later. Because this is the story behind the time that the Lions compared losing a game to, you know, an actual freaking disaster. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and just what went down after the game, we need some context to understand not just the importance of this game right here, but how this game actually went. It's October 26, 1975. It's week 6 of the NFL season, and we've got an interconference game on our hands down at the Astrodome between the Detroit Lions and the Houston Oilers. For the main team in our story, the Lions, this is a massive game for them. After a 3-1 start to the season, following a loss to the Minnesota Vikings the previous week, the Lions found themselves entering this game with a 3-2 record. The good news for the Lions was that they still had a winning record. The bad news was that the NFC Central was slipping away from them, with the Vikings running away with things with a 5-0 record, giving them a 2-game lead, plus the tiebreaker head-to-head. And to compound the problem even more, the Lions were tied with St. Louis and Washington at 3-2, for the lone wildcard spot in the conference near the halfway point of the season. So they did not have a ton of room for error. Win this game and get to 4-2, and beat a very good Houston Oilers team that sits at 4-1 and boasts the third best defense in football, and you put yourself in a good spot as we near the second half of the campaign. Lose this game, and you're in some trouble, and you definitely have some work to do. The Lions led 6-0 in the first quarter. They then proceeded to allow 24 straight points. In short, this game was a game of contrasts. When all was said and done, the Lions lost this one 24-8, and didn't look that good in the process. It was an extremely sloppy game where the Lions committed 9 penalties for 106 yards. Anytime you allow more than 100 yards of penalties, you're going to put yourself in a tough spot. While Detroit's offensive line faltered at times, allowing 3 sacks, Detroit's defensive line did nothing against the pass whatsoever, as Dan Pastorini, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, did not get sacked once. The Lions had no answers for the Pro Bowl wideout and a potential future Hall of Famer, Billy White Shoes Johnson, who scored twice, with one coming on a 27-yard pass and the other coming on a monster 52-yard punt return. And the Lions, despite forcing 5 turnovers, did nothing with them, as when you force 5 turnovers and lose the game by 16 points, or 3 possessions back in 1975, since the 2-point conversion did not exist, you know you didn't play that well. But perhaps most interestingly about this game right here was just how many guys got hurt. 8 guys alone got hurt during the first half between the Lions and the Oilers. And one of them, Lions wide receiver John Staggers, would not only tear his Achilles tendon and miss the rest of the season as a result, but would never play in the NFL again. And if you're going to have guys get hurt, what's the one position that you can't have injuries happen at? You guessed it, quarterback. The Lions got dealt just about the crappiest hand possible when it came to their quarterback situation. Starting the game at quarterback for the Lions on this day was Bill Munson. He had to leave the game early at one point with a knee strain, and was replaced by backup quarterback, the late Greg Landry. Landry threw 5 passes before, what do you know, he left with a knee strain. The Lions were down to their 3rd-string quarterback with Joe Reed, the man acquired from the San Francisco 49ers. And even though Munson returned to the game, he wasn't even close to full strength. It was looking extremely likely that Munson and Landry were not going to suit up next week and might even be done for the entire season, which, as it turns out, they were. Things got so bad that Marlon Briscoe, a wide receiver, was listed as the backup quarterback if something happened to Reed. Granted, Briscoe could play quarterback, as he played in 1968 with the Denver Broncos before going to the Buffalo Bills, where his position would be changed to wideout. But that tells you everything you need to know. When you have 5 different players in one game dropping back to pass at one point, something went horribly wrong. So after this game right here, I think it's safe to say that nothing went right. You lost the game to drop to 500. You lost your starting quarterback for the season, and you lost your backup quarterback for the season. Now being down to your 3rd stringer, who was 1 for 8 on the season thus far, completing 12% of his passes. How are you going to regroup, bounce back, and try to make the playoffs for the first time since 1970? Well, you're going to have to rally around your 3rd-string quarterback. That's what you're going to do. You'll rally around Joe Reed and play good football. You're not going to throw in the towel. You'll get knocked down, but you'll get back up again because you ain't ever going to keep them down. At least, that's what most coaches would say, or something along those lines. Something about Joe Reed being ready for the moment, something about the next man up, something about resilience and rising to the occasion, and to be fair, Rick Forzano did echo those thoughts. He just went about it in a really weird way. At first, Forzano said, "We'll try to bring in another quarterback as soon as possible." Alright, that makes sense. No issues there. You'd be dumb not to bring in another quarterback even if you believed in Reed, seeing as you only have one healthy quarterback on your roster, and you don't want a wide receiver being one injury away from being thrown under center. Ask the Denver Broncos in 2020 how that worked out for them having a wide receiver play quarterback. But then, Forzano said on the injuries to Landry and Munson, and the outlook of the team after this game right here, it will be a struggle, but we'll field the team. We'll do like they did when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Yes, you heard that right. No, I did not misspeak. Rick Forzano, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, compared losing his quarterbacks and bouncing back from that to the United States getting attacked at Pearl Harbor. The day that will live in infamy? Turns out that was the day the Lions lost both their quarterbacks. I mean, is Pearl Harbor really the best comparison that you come up with, though? Is that really the best one? I think losing this game right here is a little bit different than, Pearl freaking Harbor. This is like when Sean McDermott, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, tries to get his guys to think about teamwork and great examples of teamwork. And he used 9/11 as an example of that from the perspective of the terrorists, and how the terrorists came together to execute a plan to knock down the Twin Towers. If that sounds too absurd to believe, I swear I am not making that up. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And it's not as though Rick Forzano had no idea what Pearl Harbor was. He was in the Marines at one point, albeit nowhere close to when Pearl Harbor happened, and he even served as Navy's head coach for 4 seasons before joining the Detroit Lions. It's not as though the man doesn't understand the significance of that day and what it means. And for him to compare Pearl Harbor, even if it was meant in a positive sense in terms of bouncing back, to losing your quarterback during a football game? I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. I just don't. It's bizarre. That's what it is. And when it came to this man right here in Rick Forzano, what's even more bizarre is that, I kid you not, in 1971, after his Navy team lost 31-16 to Miami, he literally told reporters a few years before this as Navy's head coach to, I swear to God, not take each loss as though it were Pearl Harbor. 4 years later, look at him now. You can't make this up if you tried. 4 years ago, he was saying, guys, it's just a football game. You can't compare this moment to war and to one of the most devastating days in American history. Now, this loss is our Pearl Harbor. Then again, Forzano wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. When he was coaching high school football back in the 1950s, he hired a speaker for the team's banquet. And even though the team was winless, the speaker praised the team because the speaker made a crap ton of money off of betting against them every week. He didn't exactly know what he was doing. So if you think Forzano said something like this in malice, I'm inclined to believe that it wasn't. I'm inclined to believe that it was a stupid thing done by a stupid person, or at the very least, not the smartest when it came to certain aspects of life. As for what happened after the game between these two teams behind me right here, the Detroit Lions would finish the season with a 7-7 record, which, all things considered, is not too shabby considering the fact that they had to play with Joe Reed the rest of the way at quarterback, as in their third stringer. Granted, the Lions did go 6-3 before dropping 4 of their final 5, but still, 7-7 is not too bad when you look at it like that, even if they missed the playoffs by a fair amount of games. Forzano would not last too much longer after 1975. In 1976, after just 4 games, he was relieved of his duties in just about the weirdest way possible, as after winning a game against the Atlanta Falcons, the Lions owner came out and said that had Forzano lost that game, and had Forzano lost to the Falcons, he would have been fired, which, interesting strategy right there. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The mid-70s Lions were painfully mediocre, but by God, they were painfully interesting as well. So as a lesson to anyone watching this video, if you're thinking about what to say to the press regarding certain situations, think of what Rick Forzano did. And then, do the exact opposite. Maybe don't compare certain situations to American tragedies when people died from said tragedies, and people from said tragedies are still alive. Think of anything else, literally anything else, and you'll be okay. If the only thing you can come up with to make your point is Pearl Harbor, then by God, come up with something else. Don't use an actual disaster in an example for a sporting event. If this video doesn't do well, I'm not going to say that I'm going to bounce back and try again like Asheville after the hurricane, because that'd be really freaking insensitive and really freaking stupid. And I don't think Rick Forzano got the memo. I don't think he did. Because every October 26th, we gather around to remember those that lost their lives in the true day that will live in infamy. The day where the Detroit Lions lost 24-8 to the Houston Oilers. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.